Stencils are a really good way of getting branding or logos or like very specific bits of damage or paintwork onto a surface very easily. And there's a couple of different ways we can do it. So what we'll be using to actually make the shape is something called an alpha. And an alpha, I've created here, this sun stamp and this Android stencil, are just a black and white image. Black being obviously the negative and white being the positive. Whatever's white is going to be stamped on. So in Photoshop I've downloaded and I've got this Android mask, and then I've just saved it out as a PSD. So I'm saving this out as a PSD, so your standard Photoshop file, Android stencil. And when I want to import that into the scene, I can literally just drag open, well, make sure Substance Paint is open the window with the folder that contains my PSD, and just drag that into the project folder here. So what I've done is I've dragged in that Android stencil, and I'll do it again actually to show you setup. So I've dragged that in, and you're going to get this import resources window up. So it's asking me here, this Android stencil PSD. This undefined, we need to define what the purpose of this object is, or this file. So if you actually click on that, we're going to get a few options: an alpha, a color LUT, an environment, or a texture. So we're not using it for texture, we're not using it for any colors, and we're not using it for an environment. So we're literally just using it as an alpha, so we can use it to either stamp normal map on there, stamp ambient occlusion map, you know, for that sort of thing. So clicking alpha. So now that will be brought in as an alpha. And import to, well, I'm just going to put it into the current session. Import. There we go. So I've actually done it twice, so I've got two of them. But if I go into my projects folder, so I've got it here. And what we're going to do is we're going to need to make an entirely new layer for our stamp. So I've got my main body here, and I want to stamp this on the back in this area here. So it's kind of like a little company branding or whatever, gang. So I'm going to make a new layer at the very top of my stack here, just by clicking this button. So click that, I've got a layer. Now I've been using the stamp so far, so everything's gone a little bit white because I'm in stamp mode. So you can see there my face has already been selected, so I'll actually just reset the whole thing a little bit. We're using some of the functions up in this window up in the top left now. So if I go over here, we've got a paintbrush, an eraser, and a projection. So a paintbrush, I can literally just paint stuff on. An eraser, obviously I can erase stuff. And a projection works a little bit differently. I'm going to get rid of that. So what's going to happen when I click projection here, or if I click and hold, you're going to get a couple of different variants. A physical projection uses the physical paint tool to kind of give you a much more realistic effect to your stencil. I'm not really bothered about that for this because it's a stylized character, so I'm just going to make sure it's in projection. Now what happens is everything turns white, or a bit brighter, because that's us in stencil mode, or in stamp mode, projection mode. So that's allowing us to see that we're projecting stuff onto our surface. So I've just got a square alpha, a flat square alpha that I can stamp on. But that's not really what I want. I want to have my Android face in this area. So actually, I'll just turn off the armor so it's not. There we go. Now, on our properties here, we're in properties projection. In this first tab, we can decide what we actually want to add. So here we've got the size, the flow, which is basically the opacity, stroke opacity, spacing. We don't have to worry about spacing because we're only clicking once. We're not going to be clicking and dragging. But you can experiment with all these different functions. In fact, I would implore you all to experiment with all these different functions. But at the bottom here, I've got this alpha, and this is what I want to plug my Android stencil into. So if I click this alpha, I'm going to get all the black and white images I can use. So if I go to the top, I've got my Android stencil. I click that, and now if I hover and drag over my surface, you can see that I've got my little stencil is showing me what it can do. So I can actually scale up and down this stencil, so I can either have it really big, or I can have it really small. I can even change what I want to, so if I'm going back to my properties, I can even change what I want it to do. So I can either just have it do the spec, so specularity, which in this case is just a colour because I've not even got a specular channel in here. But if I want to just do it height map, I can have it just do a raise off the surface like that. And I can change those parameters down here. So with height map selected, I've got my height. So I can either have it go right in, like that, are really intense, or I can have it coming all the way out like that. But I just want I just want the colour to be applied. So I'm gonna just scale it up a little bit, and so there we go. I've stamped in my face at the back. And I can go around and I can stamp a little bit more if I want to, or I can change the alpha inside here to be another alpha. So say I want this one to be on a sleeve, I can go around and I can place this stamp right there. I can even stamp inside the UV flat window, so like that. So that's one way of adding a projection, or adding a stamp. The other way is actually going to my paint brush, which is here, and then adding in a stencil here. So we've actually got a stencil section. So if I click that and I go to my Android, we get this in our 3D view. Gets kind of like this overlay, and this is basically showing us what we can actually start painting this whole stamp everywhere, or we can obviously just pick individual. So I'm actually going to pick. I've got a stupid paint alpha on my paintbrush for some reason. Just give myself a normal standard. Okay. I can just paint that individual face like that. Now what I can also do that we couldn't do with the other, just using the projection like that, is I can, in this view, use my paintbrush with stencil applied. If I hold S, I get this little menu up on the side. S plus right mouse button. So if I click and drag my right mouse button, allows me to scale up my stamp or my stencil. Shift S and left allows us to snap rotate. Or well, just S and left click allows us to rotate. Shift and S allows us to snap rotate to 90 degrees. And Shift middle mouse allows us to pan. This is very cool. So I can just move my object around, make sure I'm in the middle. I can scale it up a little bit, make sure it's in the right position, and then I can actually paint that on a little bit like that. Ooh. Now the great thing about probably using this approach is that I can add as much as I want to. I'm not just putting down the entire stamp straight away. I can actually go in there and for instance, if I give myself a bit of a gnarly brush, so let's get something a bit, yeah, something like that. So our brush now is a little bit, you can see there it's, oh, if I make my brush bigger, there we go, it's a bit of a textured brush. So I can actually start to get a bit more of a very uneven quality to it. So if I take off my stencil build, see, there we go. So just by doing that, I've got more of an uneven quality to it. Now I probably prefer the projection method, because I think actually laying in the stamp at the beginning is a lot easier. if I go back to my projection and I get my Android face, because I can basically use the same functions as with the brush. If I hold control and right mouse left and right, I can make it bigger or smaller. I can also use the mirror tool to make sure I'm getting it as close to the center as I can, or I can turn it off and try and just hand it in like that. The only problem is, yes, I can't rotate it, so then I'd have to probably go into the other one and rotate the actual stencil around. But if I wanted to get this a little bit gnarled or a little bit worn out, all I have to do is go to my erase brush, and then I can start doing it manually. I don't have to try and guesswork the stencil in this mode. I don't have to try and guesswork it and then accidentally click on the other faces around the side. I can just attack this one. So press 2 for my eraser brush, and then I can just go around and just start affecting it a little bit. And then if I want to start seeing, because it still looks a little bit low resolution. The great thing about Substance Painter, I can just up that resolution to 4K. So when it does this little thing, thinking about what it's doing, and then in a much higher resolution, I can get a much better idea about how I want to attack this. But then I am also dealing with the fact that it is 4K, so then probably might bring it back down to 1, and then just attack it a little bit more. Maybe knock it up to 2K. So there are many different ways of viewing this, using this stamping tool. There you go. Of course, if I wanted to stamp in some normal information, so maybe on the armor there is a logo, I can do that. So this main armor piece is going to have a logo in this area. So I will make a new layer at the very top of everything, which is going to be my stencil layer, and I'm going to use this. I'm going to use the paintbrush stencil. So I'm going to, in my stencil here, I'm going to take that off. I don't want that. I'm also going to make sure that I'm in paint mode and not in physical paint mode. So in my stencil, I'm going to find another different logo. Let's go for the Substance Painter one. There we go. And I will position that so it's about right. There we go. Now I'm going to stamp this into the surface so it looks like it's actually embossed. So I'll take off my that. I will get rid of that. I will get rid of. So I'll just keep these two. And I'll change my height information to be a little bit lower. So I can just push it in a little bit. Get a better brush for this, get a harder edged brush so I'm not accidentally trailing off onto other parts. So like that. So pushing that in a little bit. Push, 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 push. Push, 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 push. So maybe I want to increase that height size a little bit. Yeah. Cool.